so we can all see.
Oh, perfect. All right. Thank you, Carmelo. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I hope by the end of the presentation we can all still be friends. I want to invite all of you to scan the QR code. There's a lot of graphs in this presentation, and they're interactive. If you scan the barcode, you get to keep the presentation, keep the graphs, and you'll get more out of it than I can give you in 10 minutes. And so here we go. Next slide. The Trade Barrier Index is a tool to see what trade barriers are out there, what countries are using these trade barriers, and to what degree. If you go to the website, you can compare different countries and how they're using trade barriers. Don't scan this QR code. You get the last year's edition. So hopefully you scan the one on the first page. The Trade Barrier Index, it looks at the three most direct forms of trade barriers, tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and services restrictions. And then facilitation is the fourth component. It looks at the behind-the-border measures that allow trade to happen voluntarily. Each of these have 3 or 4 indicators with them. So for instance, for tariffs, we're not looking just at the most favored nation tariff rate, but also the percent of lines that are duty-free and the total number of tariff lines. Next slide. So why is this important? Major 2 reasons. First, the ability to trade voluntarily on mutually beneficial terms from one person to another in another country is someone's natural right. People should be able to trade their stuff across borders. And this reminds us that it's not countries that are trading, it's people that are trading, businesses that are trading. And what the Trade Barrier Index shows is the first countries with the lowest scores means lower trade barriers. It's only about 6% of the world's population are in those countries, but they produce 21% of global GDP. This is the story of comparative advantage. But the last 3 countries on the index, they're home to 20% of the world's population, but they also only produce around 7% of global GDP. So these are markets where trade is very restrictive. There's a lot of economic planning than free markets, and they just don't do as well as countries that have the lowest trade barriers. Second, we know from the correlations with the index that there's tons of economic and social indicators that improve when countries have lower trade barriers. They have more economic prosperity, they have more human freedom, they're better equipped to take advantage of AI, and they have more network readiness, and they have less illicit trade, they have less corruption, and more prosperity and abundance. So these are the reasons why it's important to look at trade barriers and see which ones we can knock down. And next slide. This is where the world rankings are. So in the last edition, we do this every 2 years. We had 88 countries. In this edition, we have 122. And as you can probably guess, Singapore is number 1. And United States is number 61. So the United States firmly in the middle. Don't let anyone tell you the bastion of free trade is the United States. It never was. United States is last place in the non-tariff barrier section. And then in Southeast Asia, we have a lot of variation in the regional scores. So we have the freest countries. We also have the most restrictive. So unfortunately, Indonesia is in last place this year. But we also have China is 114th. 117th is Vietnam. 118th, Thailand. Next slide. And so on each of these graphs, on the right side is the region scores, and on the left side is the Southeast Asia, like individual countries, and then I've included the United States for context. So these are the main scores overall. So you can see the horizontal line is the world average. So you can see the US score very similar to the world average. And Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, way above. So the higher score means the higher trade barriers, lower score, lower trade barriers. Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, New Zealand, Australia. They're all in the top 10 of the index, lower than the world average. And if you scan the QR code, maybe at the end, we can go back to that, you can click on each of these and see how they measure up against each other or isolate the different numbers. Next slide. So on the tariff section, like I said, we look at the average tariff rate, how many lines are duty-free, and the total number of tariff lines. On Indonesia, has a much higher tariff rates than the world average. But one thing that changed between this edition and the last edition, usually it's India that's always in last place. Indonesia raised the number of tariff lines, and also in services restrictions, the restrictions on construction services increased just slightly, while India liberalized a little bit. And next slide. This is the scores on services. Services restrictions are the rules on how foreign businesses can operate within a country. What we see with Western Europe and high-income countries, these are very low, almost non-existent. But then in Southeast Asia and the other regions, these are very high, and there's lots of barriers to entry for different individual industries. And we have an excellent case study how this impacted iPhones in Indonesia. And these are things that Western countries or people where Indonesia is negotiating trade agreements, these are big issues in those negotiations. Next slide. So on non-tariff barriers, these are the individual rules on what goods can enter the country. So services are for how businesses enter the country. Non-tariff barriers are technical requirements, labeling restrictions, quotas. These are the reasons why American chicken isn't allowed in the European Union, and they don't allow GMO and agricultural products. These are the reasons why the United States doesn't allow, for some reason we don't allow sunscreen from Europe and in the rest of the world. We don't allow dairy products. During COVID, we had a shortage of infant formula, and we couldn't import that over. So these are the last place I mentioned, the United States, and then behind that, the European Union. These really high-income countries love to use the non-tariff barriers, where the rest of the world doesn't use them that much. Next slide. This is the facilitation component. So we look at, are there property rights? Do people have the ability to protect their goods from counterfeits in the market? We look at logistics performance. Are there highways and ports that are easy to use? Are there less restrictions on the paperwork to transport stuff in and out? And then we look at membership in free trade agreements, and then digital trade restrictions. So digital trade restrictions is the only component that we make in the index. The rest come from the WTO and the OECD and other major indices. And this is where there's a big red flag in the index, where most new trade barriers happening now are these digital trade restrictions. Everyone knows about China's Great Firewall and all the list of 20 or so American companies that can't operate in China because of these. A lot of these restrictions from the European Union are now restricting how people's experience on the internet works in Europe. But also we have other case studies in the index about how, like the AI Act, for instance, has restricted the newest iPhones. They weren't available in Indonesia. They are now. But the newest iPhones aren't available in Europe because of their concern about the AI Act and other regulations that keep running into trouble with the courts. Next slide. And this is the, so these are the individual, the digital trade restrictions. We look at digital service taxes, content moderation, content localization, security barriers are those barriers we see more from authoritarian states. And then data flow barriers, they kind of have the same effect, but those are the ones that are more from the European side, where they have the general data protection regulations. And then we have gig economy restrictions. Next slide. This is an overview of some of those and how we classify them in the index. And next slide. And these are some of our case studies that if you go online, you can download them. These are the favorite part of the index because they can show what these numbers mean in real life on the ground of these countries. I think a big takeaway from the index is that we're living in a different world where trade barriers are rising, and people know that we've already had these different regulations on the internet, and it's really concerning how the iPhone is a canary in the coal mine of globalization. We're seeing how these markets are bifurcating, and we have different versions in different countries. And going forward, we can see this happening with chips. Some chips will be available. There could be American versions, there'll be Asian versions, electronic cars. And this would be a problem for global innovation, a global competition, when we have markets that can't compete against each other. But the good news is that there's nowhere, Indonesia has the best opportunity to improve on the index because of, like the last speaker said, to take advantage of the trade war started by Trump. All these companies are looking for how they can get out of China, divert their supply chains, and they're all coming to Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam. This is the place where the future manufacturing is happening. My takeaway from the Indonesia scores on the index, a lot of Indonesia's trade is actually happening within countries it has trade agreements with. So it can really lower those tariff barriers by lowering the average tariff rate to something that reflects what is actually happening. It can also improve by increasing the number of lines that are duty-free. This is very low in Indonesia. At least decreasing that to the region's average would really improve the score a lot. And also those services restrictions. We know from other high-income countries that being able to, instead of having to create individual deals with individual countries or go through tough trade negotiations, by liberalizing those services restrictions, you can have hundreds of deals at once, and they don't have to go through